Hello, and welcome to the Jisc Cyber Essentials Plus Primer. I'm Sam Eaton-Rose, the Jisc Cyber Essentials Plus lead auditor and penetration testing team lead. In this presentation, I'm going to be talking about a brief overview of what Cyber Essentials Plus is. I'm going to talk about what you need to do to get it. I'm going to outline the tests that an assessor will carry out. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happens if you fail or if you need to fix anything. So what is Cyber Essentials Plus? Well, it's outlined by the NCSC and then implemented by the accrediting body IASME. IASME accredits certifying bodies, such as Jisc, to carry out the tests. Where Cyber Essentials Basic is a self-assessment, Cyber Essentials Plus is an audited certification, which means an assessor needs to check and award the assessment. The assessor is testing for a set of controls that will help protect the network and its users from the majority of high-end critical security risks. And as an extra note, the NCSC publishes the Cyber Essentials Plus illustrative test specification, which outlines the requirements for assessors. This is public and can be found online. IASME publishes additional guidance that's not public for their assessors, but if you want to, you can go and look this up and get a more technical outline of the test. So the requirements for doing a Cyber Essentials Plus assessment. Like Cyber Essentials Basic, Cyber Essentials Plus is a yearly certification. You need to have Cyber Essentials Basic in order to assess against Cyber Essentials Plus, and this has to be done within 90 days of that certification. If you're outside of that window, you'll have to recertify against Cyber Essentials Basic in order to go for the Cyber Essentials Plus assessment. The scope of your Cyber Essentials Plus assessment has to be identical to the Cyber Essentials Basic that you've got. If there was a difference, say you did Cyber Essentials against your entire organization, but you only wanted to do Plus against a smaller network, you would then have to recertify that smaller network against Cyber Essentials Basic before you could do the assessment for Plus. The assessment consists of 5 test areas, all of which must pass in order to have a pass awarded overall. The assessment can be carried out on-site or remotely. As long as all of the tests can be carried out remotely, then we can do it remotely. If there are other issues preventing that, then we can do it on-site. Remote testing can help save time on the test and thus save you money, so that we prefer to do that where possible. I'm just going to outline the 5 tests now, and then we'll go and look at them in more detail. So the first 2 tests are scans, which are automated vulnerability scans carried out externally and internally. Tests 3 to 5 are end-user device tests, which are repeated against a sample of devices. For tests 3 to 5, the assessor will carry out each of these tests against multiple end-user devices, such as desktops, laptops, or mobile devices, and they'll do that using normal user-level credentials. They'll agree on a sample based on the device types you have in use. This could be 5 of each type or build, but it's often useful to prepare a few backups in case any complications arise during the test. For these tests, you only need to include normal user devices that provide a desktop interface. If users are only using a command line interface, or a server is only accessed for administrative tasks, it's out of scope. The sample should represent at least 90% of the devices in use. This means that if you have 400 Windows desktops and 2 Macs and 1 iPad, you don't necessarily need to hunt down all of those corner cases for the assessment. And they should be systems that represent how they are when they're in use, which could be user machines or shared environments. Test 1 is a vulnerability scan across the whole external facing network range of the in-scope network. You'll provide a list of targets in scope. At the very least, this is likely to include the firewalls that control access to the internal network. The assessor will carry out a scan of the provided range in order to identify open services and vulnerabilities. Higher critical vulnerabilities will result in a fail on this test and should be remediated. There are some exceptions which can be seen in the illustrative test specification, but generally anything with a CVSS version 3 score of 7 or above is a fail. For each discovered service, the assessor goes through the following process, which again is in this test spec. So if the service includes vulnerabilities that are high or critical, then that will result in a fail. Otherwise, if the service is entirely public and read-only, then that's fine, we don't need to worry about the security of it. If otherwise, access is restricted only to certain areas, say through an allow list of specific IPs, then that's fine, and that's a way of locking down the security. If not, then we need users to authenticate to access the service. We know that there's some kind of non-public information, so if there's no kind of password protection or authentication in place and it's open to the internet, then that will result in a fail for this service. If two-factor authentication is enabled for its users, then that's a pass and we don't need to go any further. If authentication can be bypassed trivially, such as just visiting a page that's beyond the authentication or putting in trivial, simple common credentials or default credentials, then that will result in a fail. If you receive the service and it comes with default passwords and you've not changed them, that's a failing issue as well. Then, if there's a login throttle, say if you try and log in incorrectly too many times in a row, it will lock you out for a while, then that will result in a pass. But if not, then there needs to be a lockout after 10 failed attempts. And if that's correct, then you'll pass overall. And essentially, this flowchart is followed by the assessor for each discovered service to decide whether it's a pass or a fail. Test 2 is an internal credentialed patch scan. The internal scan is carried out across the entire internal network in scope, including servers. Appropriate administrator level credentials should be provided or available, such as domain admin. The scan will check with each system for missing patches and other vulnerabilities. This test will fail if higher critical security vulnerabilities are present, such as unsupported operating systems or missing security patches. As with the external test, only higher critical security issues apply. Test 3, checking the malware protection on end-user devices. On each of the devices in the sample, the assessor will look for some sort of protection against malware. So that depends on what's in place again on the device in question. Typically on computers, this is in the form of anti-malware software. For this, the assessor will be checking that the software is updated daily and that it scans files on access. For certificate-protected devices, usually mobile devices, the assessor will check the certificates. As well, if this protection is in use, they may also check for jailbreaking, which would allow a user to run unsigned software. And if you're using sandboxing to protect users in a limited environment, then an assessor will want to confirm that it works and it applies to all of the software that the user can install. So test 4 tests the end user device's defenses against email malware. You'll provide an email account that we can send test emails to. We'll send an array of emails, which include emails with no attachments to test deliverability, emails with antivirus test files attached, and emails with non-malware executables. The test files are completely harmless files that the antivirus community agrees to treat as viruses for this kind of purpose. So then, from each email client will go in and check whether these files can be accessed. For each malware file, the user should be prevented from downloading or running it. This could mean that the email was blocked entirely and not delivered, that the attachment was stripped, or that the client or local antivirus stops it. For each executable file, it should either be blocked entirely or require additional user input to run. This could be a notification such as untrusted source, do you wish to run this? But anything that makes the user have to click and confirm that they're running it will result in a pass, if that applies to all the files we're testing. Test 5 is very similar, but it's testing from web browsers. So again, on each of those devices, from a normal user account, we're going to be testing with each web browser that's available to that user. And we'll try to run the files directly from the browser. The goal here is the same, that viruses are blocked and executables are blocked or require additional user input to run. What we don't want is to click run in the browser and have the file launch without any other input. So what if there are failures or difficulties with the test? If you have any issues on the day, you can fix them on the spot and the assessor can retest them. This could be missing patches, policies that need to be applied, etc. There might be some issues which are one-off cases. For example, I once saw a user that had local admin rights on their machine. So what I wanted to do was to see a few more devices just to make sure that that was a one-off and not an issue across the build. So again, it's good to have a couple of extra systems ready in case the assessor wants to check them. If you do fail on the day, an assessor can retest the issues that failed within 30 days. So if you fix them within that 30-day window and get the assessor to do that, then they don't need to redo all of the other tests which were a pass on the day, which will save you time and money. As a note, if there are areas where an internal policy prevents tests from being carried out, talk to us about it. For example, if you can't provide domain admin credentials, we can set up the scanning tool and have you enter them for the test so we don't have to access them directly. Each test does have to be carried out and passed to pass overall, but we can work out the details to make sure that each of them can be carried out in a way that you're happy with. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. Hopefully it's been helpful to you, and if you do have any questions, please do get in touch with us.